All right. Well, welcome back. Hope everybody had a very, very good lunch, and hope you guys are having a good day so far. How are you doing so far? Yeah. I am Ray Redacted. That's rayredacted.com to follow me on Twitter. I'm going to mention that 3 more times, just hopefully to pick up another dozen followers today. So this is the BitBlock Battle, and let us meet our contestants. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the BitBlock Battle. It's about Bitcoin maximalism versus alternativism versus non-Bitcoin maximalism. And some of the other titles we thought about calling this was Bitcoin versus shitcoin, alt versus salt, but we ended up sticking with the battle. So let's meet the contestants. And what we're gonna be doing, guys, because we just got back from lunch, is we're going to keep this panel moving very, very quickly. You'll see a clock on the stage that's going to give each contestant 1 minute to answer the questions, and we're going to start off by introducing the panelists. From your left to right, this is Tony Sakala, this is Dee, and this is Mark Rizzo. I'm going to give each one of them 1 minute to introduce themselves, starting with Tony.
All right, let's be really quick here. No, I need way less than a minute. My name's Tony Sakala, and I was the co-host on the Crypto Cousins podcast for season 1. And I grabbed Gary about a year and a half ago, and I said, Gary, have you heard of this crypto stuff? And we sat down and started talking about it, and then the rest was history. And so we went down this long path of discovering Bitcoin and discovering everything that was going on, and came to do this conference last year, and excited that a lot of you came back and a lot more joined us. Thank you.
That's awesome. Okay, let me stop this.
You still had 16 seconds.
There we go. Go.
Hey guys, I'm D. Dimitrik, my government name. I run the Bitcoin Podcast Network, and first host on the Bitcoin Podcast. We run a lot of shows. We've run like 15 different shows over the last 4.5 years. Gary asked me to come out. I said yes, with bells on. At Fergalati on Twitter. And I'm supposed to be the middle of the road guy. I'm a minority, not for obvious reasons in crypto, but I'm a minority in the fact that I think that there can be more than just one token. But I'm not all the way to the side that guy is. So, yeah, I'm not a pariah just yet. So that's me. I'm D.
And then playing the role of the heel for today's festivities.
Boo this guy.
Go.
All right, so my name is Mark Hopkins. I guess a little bit ironically, I am the host of Ask Dr. Bitcoin. But I do legitimately call myself a blockchain maximalist. You can read some of my other credits there on the slide there. I won't repeat that for you, but like I do love Bitcoin, but I do love a lot of the innovations in blockchain. I think that Bitcoin dominance is not necessarily a healthy thing for the ecosystem, and you can begin your booing now.
And Mark, we'll just keep it with you real quick. So from your left to the right, the idea being maximalist to minimalist on this side. Tell us, why are you a Bitcoin minimalist or altcoin maximalist?
Well, so people ask me to define Bitcoin in a sentence. I say Bitcoin is the reference architecture for blockchain, which is a protocol, decentralized protocol for mitigating the requirement for trust between counterparties. That is to say that Bitcoin is really great, but it's not the only application for blockchain. There's a lot of really important things, I think, that we need to decentralize, and finance is just one of those things. And I think if you add up all the other financial and non-financial things we could decentralize with blockchain, I think Bitcoin would be a minority. A very important piece of the puzzle, but a minority nonetheless.
Tony, why is Mark wrong?
Well, you know, the idea of blockchain, not Bitcoin, or blockchain came out of Bitcoin is really completely getting it backwards, because as we saw earlier today, that the word blockchain wasn't really even in the white paper. It was in the code, a blockchain. And so the idea that a string of database blocks is important outside of the idea that we have independent people securing the blockchain with proof of work has led so many companies down this long, winding path of, well, we think this is going to be good for X, Y, or Z, supply chain, healthcare, the list goes on and on. But, as you know with Silicon Valley, if something's shiny and it's going to collect money, then let's put that buzzword on it. So I see it as just a lot of stringing together of buzzwords.
And D, why is it not a binary choice? Why is neither extreme correct?
I think you're both wrong. I just want to start there. I'll say you're a little bit right because finance touches everything, and Bitcoin's doing that the best. So what I think is that for these altcoins or these shit coins, if you're going to be a bona fide shit coin, at least be a good one, and dedicate time to working with the Bitcoin blockchain. Because you can't get around finance. Everywhere we go, somebody's throwing finance at us, and it's just the way the world works. Now what I'll say where you're wrong is that not everything needs to be decentralized. I mean, we naturally centralize things. We're humans. We do that naturally. Like right now, I'm looking at the clock. Right now, all this beautiful electricity that we're taking advantage of, we centralize trust of that activity to a group, somebody who's miles away from here, controlling the grid, making sure that we get to enjoy all these cool things. So we naturally centralize, and it's better to have centralization with some things, just not with finance. Ether's not money, so.
No, it's a great utility token.
Great, awesome. Well, that's going to get us right to our next question. Are all alts shit? Let's start with you, Tony. Are all altcoins shit coins?
100% all altcoins are shit coins. I like to just refer back to this one phrase, is that Bitcoin was created in an immaculate conception. So it came about in a way that we don't know who Satoshi Nakamoto is. We don't have somebody who's trying to hire a PR agency to create some sort of publicity around Bitcoin. In fact, we know that Satoshi said on the Bitcoin Talk forum, thank you, that he said, look, we can't go public so quickly. We can't be inundated with people using us. We're not ready yet. So he was trying to slow it down, and I think that was with regard to WikiLeaks. When WikiLeaks started to use Bitcoin, it was like, we're not ready yet. He was trying to slow it down. On the other hand, you see alts. What is the meaning of the alt? You look back and say, who is the founder? Who is Zuko? Who is this guy or that guy? Why are they involved? Who's Dan Larimar? Look these people up. Find out about this person or that person. Have they committed fraud before? Like actually, there are coins that were founded by people who were in jail or convicted of committing fraud. And so, they couldn't do things in the main space, so they went to this new wild west of crypto.
Now, is committing fraud a plus or a minus in the ICO?
It's a good question.
We're all right.
It needs to be on.
So, Mark, is Ethereum an altcoin? Do we consider Ethereum to be an alt?
Well, it's not Bitcoin, so I guess that would make it an alt. I wouldn't say it's a shitcoin. I think it serves a completely different function. It's not a currency, as you said. It's not a financial instrument in the same way that Bitcoin is. There's a piece of research that we did at Roger Wilco where we talk about blockchains and tokens being on a spectrum. There's not there's this push within government and the state to try to classify things so we figure out which regulatory agency has their charge over Bitcoin or ICOs or whatever. But it's more like a spectrum. You look at what Ethereum was when it launched. It was 100% of security. It was not useful for anything other than raising equity for the company. And then they launched the ability to run compute in the Ethereum cloud, essentially. So it became a utility token. But then it was listed on Coinbase. So it is something of a currency. People use it to store value. It's not a great store of value, but it is a store of value. So I think it's a spectrum.
Awesome, awesome. D, what about Bitcoin Cash and its cousins?
What?
Bitcoin Cash and its cousins.
I don't remember that question that we rehearsed.
Is that an alt?
Bitcoin Cash is bullshit. That's where I'm staying.
Mixed applause on that one.
Yeah, sorry. Roger Ver came on my show. I told him he was full of shit, and I continuously do so. Now, I want to go to your argument here. Nobody gives a shit about Satoshi. Just like nobody gives a shit about who invented paper currency, no one gives a shit about who commoditized the production of gold bullions. No one gives a shit about who invented the check. No one gives a shit about who invented the credit card. No one's ever going to care if you give enough time. So that argument that like these central powers that start these altcoins, they're the bad guys, it's bullshit, because over enough time, everyone's going to forget who they are if the thing they built works and empowers enough people. Now over here, these shit coins that start up like Fuck Token and Garlic Coin and Lemon Coin, I mean, it's just pure shit. It's as shitty as it gets, and it's just a quick turnaround so they can make as much money and dust off into the sunset and just go. I mean, it's just pure shit. So there's that middle ground there where there's actual, it's funny. Do I have time?
No, you're on time.
Why is the clock not running?
Go for it.
The best companies in the altcoin space are the ones that are trying to program themselves out of being a company. They're trying to write these
100%
distributed
agree.
autonomous things that is going to, if everyone uses that, we don't need them as a company anymore. So that's who you pay attention to in the shitcoin space. And then hopefully you sell before it goes down.
Now, do you guys want to retort to that? Untimed retorts?
And I 100% agree with that last statement. Like when I say blockchain maximalism, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for things that function without much of a custodial organization, like Bitcoin does. Bitcoin is the reference architecture for blockchain. If you can do it like Bitcoin did, you're doing it right. If you require a strong central organization to make your blockchain work, you're not really, you need like an ERP or something. You don't need blockchain.
Is that ERP or XRP?
No one needs XRP.
Stop cursing them. Stop cursing, Ray.
So, all right, let's move on. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the concept of dominance, dominance is a very basic rudimentary measure of the entire market capitalization of all crypto assets in the universe, with Bitcoin being a percentage of that. So nominator being Bitcoin, the denominator being the all-time. And if we look at dominance over the last few years, you certainly saw a precipitous drop a couple years ago, along with the kind of the ICO craze. But today we've seen a massive comeback, as of right now, to being the piece. So I'll ask the panel first and foremost: does it matter? Does dominance have any relevance to any of these discussions at all, Tony?
I would say dominance doesn't matter, really, because when you look at the alts that are disappearing and the alts that are coming on the scene, it really is just bad money following bad money. And so if people want to invest in alts, I don't really care, actually, if people go and do that, because Bitcoin's goal, again, I'm going to come back to the original meaning for Bitcoin, is for it to be sound money. And so if there's a subset of us that are using sound money and that starts to percolate out and have the benefits, then I don't really care if there are alts still around. I'm not like kill all the alts. I just think that it's not that critical. It's more about the usage and the user interface and how people are being onboarded. And we're seeing here today new technologies being introduced. How do you onboard people in a way that they can manage their keys without having to think of them as some sort of crazy system of keeping your keys safe?
Now, do either one of you guys think dominance matters? Is it an important metric?
I think it's very important. I mean, I don't disagree with what you just said, Tony. When you look at crypto space through the myopic lens of Bitcoin maximalism, alts that try to be currencies, they're not really contributing anything other than maybe whatever their science project is trying to do, like Prime Coin, trying to create a cryptocurrency that does something other than just chew, hashes, but also like calculate large primes. That's interesting. It doesn't really matter how much of the Bitcoin dominance it eats into, because it's a science experiment that if it succeeds, maybe it'll get incorporated into Bitcoin, maybe it won't, who knows. Where I think it matters is if you pay attention to what the ICO space did to Bitcoin dominance. There's a large opportunity for Wall Street to transition to blockchain. I think anybody that pays attention to Wall Street finance could say that Wall Street finance would probably benefit from more transparency. And if you were to take the entirety of Wall Street and put it on a blockchain, it would destroy Bitcoin dominance, and I think that would be a positive thing.
Do you want to weigh in on this one?
The original question was, do you think dominance matters?
Does it matter? Yep.
No. So in my opinion, I say no. I think it's a bullshit metric, because honestly, I think market cap is a bullshit metric. It's kind of something that we just made to give this whole thing value so that people would pay attention to it, and it really doesn't make any sense, especially if something is supposed to be utilized. So that's why I think dominance is relevant, because it doesn't take into account how utilitarian a token is. It just takes into account this imaginary value of market cap, whatever that means. So I would say dominance is irrelevant, and that's just my opinion.
Certainly the way we calculate it now.
Yes.
So I think we have a consensus, so we're going to keep moving on until we can find something to fight about, okay?
We need to fight. Let's fight.
Let's talk about centralization, and this is the
Oh, that's a good
classic discussion around the original Bitcoin white paper, envisioning a censorship-resistant decentralized system versus some of the alts that are out there that actually will tout the benefits of that. So you're going to get to talk us through the pro-centralization part, Mark, and this is untimed.
Oof, this is tough. I don't think centralization is a good thing, but specifically in the context of the crypto space, but you have a really hard argument to make that Bitcoin isn't centralized when you look at the mining pool situation. Ooh, pin drop. I mean, so I worked with a company last year, a couple years ago, called GoChain, and in their white paper, so GoChain is a fork of Ethereum that is something called proof of reputation. It's basically a form of proof of stake, to simplify things. And their argument was that, like, basically mining is controlled by a few financial interests. It's highly centralized geographically, and certainly if you look at the way pools are kind of coalesce on things, it gets very centralized very quickly. Now those lines shift a lot, but in general, if you run a pool and you run a popular pool, you have strong centralization. If that is the case, what's your argument against centralization with proof of stake? I mean, other than the fact that it's a system where the rich literally get richer, proof of work is just proof of stake with extra steps.
Sure. So Dee, do you want to talk us through the anti-centralization premises?
I mean, yeah, I could try, but decentralization is just a goal. You never really reach it. You just don't. Everything kind of naturally centralizes. But I will argue for anti-centralization, right? There's it's anti-fragile. Is that the right word? Anti-fragility. Tongue-tied here. No one person or entity controls it, so of course you would like to have that. Value can be more true because more people get their eyes on this shared truth. What in reality, the only thing that needs to be decentralized is trust, right? We've learned that, I hope, in the last, 7 years, 10 years, that decentralization is all about decentralizing the trust. But centralization happens. I mean, like you just said, mining pools. Coinbase is just destroying everything right now. And you know why? Because people are putting their trust in Coinbase. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think that's your point to argue.
That's a really good point. Talking about Coinbase and talking about people moving towards the old model of how Bitcoin is not supposed to work, but how Bitcoin seems to be working, is that folks just go to Coinbase or they go to an exchange, they put all their money on an exchange, and they don't have their own keys. They're not using their own keys. And I think it's something we see in all technologies, the horseless carriage. We have this idea that the new technology somehow has to model the old. That's just how our brains work. And so until we wrap our brains around the new idea of decentralization and begin to understand how governance works in a decentralized way, Bitcoin already has the math. The mathematics are built in the way that the social structure works, the way that miners and developers and users can vote in the system. It's there, but it's not used by most people. And the centralization problem of mining, I don't think, I could be completely off on this, but I don't think that a 51% attack, if carried out, is in the benefit of anyone, because really, once the chain is attacked in that way, the winner really doesn't have the trust of anyone anymore. They've given up their hand.
Can I paint a nightmare scenario?
Yeah.
All right, so a lot of, perhaps a plurality of, if not the majority of, the mining is geographically located in China. If China decided it was in the state of China decided it was an economic benefit to destroy Bitcoin entirely, they could. If that damaged their enemies in a way that was significant enough, because that's the type of government they have. They can. There would be roadblocks to doing that in America if it was centralized here, perhaps.
You don't look like you're buying it, Tony. You're not buying it?
What say you, Tony?
Well, I mean, basically, I don't understand how the retort would come about, but I'm pretty sure that if all the miners were to do a certain thing, like the ASICs were doing something bad with the code and ASIC boost, etc., that the developers would counter with a new release of Bitcoin. So who gets to choose what Bitcoin we use? We do as users. Users vote with their specific software that they use. So if something nefarious were to come about, then we would just reinvent that blockchain, fork it off, because forks happen all the time. We talk about forks, but we often talk about the evil forks. Soft forks happen all the time. The user-activated soft forks move us in the right direction, and how that comes about, it is a messy process. You can't just say, oh, this will happen. Well, it's going to be messy. There are going to be baseball caps with new slogans, etc., and things will change. But that's the beauty of Bitcoin. It will adapt. It is anti-fragile in that way.
So I got a question for you, Mark. If we're supposed to decentralize everything, how are we supposed to decentralize the AT&Ts of the world? How are we supposed to decentralize, the spectrums of the world that have spent decades building a centralized infrastructure just to get data to go from point A to B? How are they going to start to build new hardware to make it possible that my cell phone could communicate directly with his cell phone, and we've got this great decentralized utopian future?
So the band is more difficult to decentralize than the box, but 5G, it's mesh. 5G is the beginnings of decentralization in the world of communications. Mesh networks are the answer to that. Mesh networks present their own difficulties. They're not good. They're not great for everything, but mesh networks is the beginning of the answer to that question.
Now, if you had mesh networks or 5G on your bingo card, go ahead and mark those off for the day. Okay, so let's talk about this. We heard a lot about this morning, and that is about energy consumption. If we look at the energy consumption, both the average as well as the minimum amount, in addition to seeing that precipitous drop-off a couple years ago, which I think we all know what caused that, was when people really started destroying their ASIC miners because they weren't economical or they weren't making money. How important is this, and does it even matter at all, Mark?
Well, this is a tough one for me too, because I'm on the record on kind of both sides of the fence here. But I think it matters in so much as this is not the most productive use of energy in the world. It's a big difficulty in defending Bitcoin. I've been in the rooms in many kind of enterprise situations. I love Bitcoin. I mean, I'm honest about it. Dr. Bitcoin's in my name, right? But like, it's the most difficult aspect of the network to defend. Is that we've got, according to media reports, the electrical output of small nations dedicated to running a single computer on the internet, essentially. If you don't think that matters, then you don't. You maybe have a dim view of the ecology of the world. You don't really think that anything we do is going to affect the future of the planet. That's a hard case to make in today's society. And you've got to really do some backflips if you want to defend Bitcoin against that sort of thing.
What do you think, Tony?
Well, I believe that it's a false argument, because energy consumption of Bitcoin is generally generated in the most optimal way, because obviously the people generating Bitcoin want to save the money. They don't want to spend money on electricity. And a libertarian will tell you straight away, it won't even go into the argument, a libertarian will tell you it's a market decision. And someone chooses to buy electricity. If someone came over to your house and said, you know what, you're using too much electricity this month, I don't think that's great for the environment. Just scale that argument up. It's like someone is buying electricity. And in the Bitcoin space, generally it's bought through renewable energy because they want to save money. They build these Bitcoin mining farms near hydro. They build them right near where the electricity is being propagated, being sourced, because once you go over wires, you lose 10 or 12% in transit. So, it really isn't, on many levels, at all a problem.
you buy that, D? Do you believe in what he's trying to say?
I'm gonna get closer to Tony on this one because I'm leaning over here. I see these like articles all the time about like Bitcoin uses more energy than 300 million households or whatever fake number that they throw into the article. I think it's well worth it. Yeah, we're damaging the planet, but there's like a list of 150 other things that are doing way worse. At least this is trying to validate the value transfer for the entire globe. Now, if that's what we need to do to push humanity closer to developing maybe more efficient ways to use energy, then that's what we need to do. Maybe that'll be the straw that breaks the camel's back, that like, hey, this thing is getting really popular, more countries seem to be mining, maybe we should just use the excess energy and find better ways to use renewable energy to literally turn energy into money. Maybe this is a good thing. What was his name? Michael Goldstein. It was like, there's no bad news. Well, in this case, I'm right there for Bitcoin. There's no bad news here. We need to push people closer to making better forms of energy, and I think this is one that validates that push.
So there's a trade-off between proof of work and proof of stake. You cannot argue against the energy efficiency of proof of stake, like in terms of validating transactions. Now, is the trade-off of the far, far greater energy efficiency worth the extra kilowatt hours, megawatt hours, terawatt hours that we're burning?
I believe that proof of stake basically says that I've been in the game longer than you, or I know somebody, or somehow I'm going to get this, and it becomes a centralization move. Proof of work basically says I rolled up my sleeves and I invested enough energy to make this work. When Bitcoin was young, a couple of laptops, a couple of GPUs strapped together, and that was a big investment of energy because Bitcoin was priced at a few pennies. Now that the value has been poured in, you can think of every electron ever spent as being adding to the value of Bitcoin, and that's what it took to get here. So it's just it's this competition, and it says who's willing to roll up their sleeves and pay more for electricity to make this, and that's what makes it valuable. That's what makes it hard money, and that's what's really transforming the world. I'm in it for the philosophy, and I see that the philosophical measure, especially if you've read Safe's book and know that society has been on a downward plummet with easy money in the last century, then you know why it's important to turn that around.
And to argue against you again here with this proof of stake blockchains, yeah, they may be more energy efficient, but what they're staking is more tokens in this blockchain. That's beautiful and all, but historically, when they do these ICOs and they have these tokens, less than 1% of the address space has like 99% of the value. So basically, you're saying that that small sliver, that 1%, is staking everything in this network, and that to me just seems like, that's worse than having 60% of the mining in China. That's like having 100% of the mining in China.
Yeah, so D, I absolutely loved the Safadine speech and Michael Bitstein's speech this morning, but you have to understand, when you try to tell somebody that's not in crypto that wasting electricity will make us better at producing
It's not waste. We're using excess energy.
That's what they hear, though. That's what they actually are hearing is if that's the case, then why don't we just waste it in other ways then as well, right? So that's the normie argument to that coin.
Well, then I'll do the ad hominem attack, and I'll say, well, what are you driving? If it's not a Tesla or a Bolt or a Bolt, get out of my face, all right?
So before we get to censorship resistance, I do want to open it up and see if there's any questions from the audience for this panel. Yes, go right ahead. You want to step up?
Sure. So this is kind of a question for everybody, but if we had a magic wand and you could wave it so that the general public understood this is Bitcoin and ICOs and blockchain or whatever are a different thing, and they're not going to get confused about it, would we care at all about this debate? Or is this really just a version of, from a maximalist perspective, of I don't really care what you guys are doing, but I don't want you to screw this up for the rest of us?
Ooh, good question. Who wants to take that one?
I think that would make everybody on the stage's life much easier if that was the case. If people could understand the difference between a shitcoin and a Bitcoin, or a token and a Bitcoin, or an ICO. BitConnect, like there are members of my family that don't know the difference between BitConnect and Bitcoin, and that bothers me.
Anybody else?
Yeah, well, I agree with Mark there. Certainly 100%. The problem, as we saw in the crazed ICO space, was that now instead of trying tell people, well, this is a world-changing technology, you've got people yelling from the stage saying this is the quickest way to get rich, and this is my coin, and it distracted and took away from the important, again, world-changing, society-changing aspects of Bitcoin.
Do we have one more question from the audience before I let these guys close out? Yes. Awesome. So you're not even going to try to pretend that you have a question, right?
Thank you. No, thank you for that.
Okay.
Yes. No.
So to that point,
Both
I mean,
good points.
So I don't know if you guys heard the question, but he basically said, yeah, there's solutions for those centralization problems already. That's great. Ever since I've been in Bitcoin, there's always been this high hope that Bitcoin is like the blob, and it's just going to eat everything and adopt all of the algorithms and all of the things, and that's just not fucking true. We've been here a while, and Bitcoin grows really slow. So although these solutions are great and grand, who's going to implement it? No one. Bitcoin's not going to implement that. Maybe one of these altcoins will. So.
He's talking about BetterHash?
I don't even know who's talking. I just hear a voice.
Good, very good point. Thank
It's a
you.
good point.
I'm going to let you guys each have a minute to close out or plug your Twitter handles or whatever else, and then we will thank you very much for joining our panel today.
That's it. Yeah, my handle is RIZZN. I love Bitcoin a lot more than I play on the stage, so please don't let that make you hesitate from following me. But yeah, so yeah, just follow me on Twitter. Talk to me about Bitcoin stuff. I love it.
Hey, I'm at Fergalati on Twitter, at the BTC Podcast. That's the network's Twitter. I'm actually the Bitcoin maximalist in our community, where we talk on Slack all day, and I'm always defending Bitcoin. I just am in that small group that thinks we can get along with some of the others. So, yeah, follow me on Twitter and join our Slack. Go to thebitcoinpodcast.com, push the Slack button, and then fill in your email. We don't sell that shit. So just come join us.
Tony?
I'm Tony Sakala. My Twitter handle is just my name, Tony Sakala. And I would just say stay tuned in to Crypto Cousins podcast. Stay tuned in to what brought you here, what you're passionate about. There's a lot of FUD out there, and it's easy to get discouraged at times. But I would just say, just follow what brought you here and how much you love the whole space. So thanks for coming out.
And I'm Ray Redacted. Please join me in thanking our panelists because they made a panel that didn't suck. Thank you.
We should have fought more, though. Like, we weren't angry enough. It's probably I got the itis.